best for last. This, for me, is going to be lots of fun to be able to see how MBB goes from an individual to a social. So, let's get going. So whenever two or more things come together, they're orchestrated by E-loops for collective natural functioning. And we're saying things because at this point we're talking about things. We're not talking about human beings. The characteristics and nature of water has nothing to do with the characteristics of the gases hydrogen and oxygen. So the characteristics of a group is not a simple extrapolation from adding up the depressors, adding up the fixes, that it's a whole new entity with amazing power. Like hydrogen and oxygen has individually a power, but look at the power of water. The universe as we know it wouldn't exist. So when two people get together, when two bits of existence gets together, that is a system. And there's a system going on. There's a loop on our net of existence. There's a loop, a smaller loop that's hydrogen, another loop is oxygen, and another loop with the central control is water. So each moment, hydrogen is created, oxygen is created, water. They each have an individual E loop, and yet they're all connected. So systems theory, or social systems, they're fine, but basically everything in nature, there's nothing that is not a system, and we call it a system because it derives from the way the net works. Okay. So let's look at a tank of gas. So if you want to describe the individual activities, so you look at one of these guys, and he's one of us, yeah, and you describe where it is and how fast it's going. So those are the individual characteristics. You know, just like each one of us has an individual characteristic. But when you put all these guys together, they form a tank of gas. And how you describe that tank of gas isn't by the individual characteristics of each one of those, but it's simply the pressure and the temperature of the tank of gas. So basically, each one of these guys has free choice. Yeah, where it goes, each one of those guys has free choice. Each one of us has free choice. Yeah, it's free choice. However, the whole collection is regulated by a determined pressure and temperature. So it just means that we're getting to bigger and bigger loops, okay? And the bigger the loop, the more power of it, and the greater the informational handling capacity of the central control. So we look at, if you take your net of existence, that there could be a couple loops for hydrogen, some oxygen, and this is water. But then, what are we made out of, okay? So there's some more loops, and then we sort of go on. So it isn't, when we look at a group, we don't necessarily look at the individual depressors and fixes and requirements, that there are different characteristics that describe a group. So let's take the population of wildlife in a particular ecosystem. They represent a hierarchy of E-loops. One, the water molecule in each one of these guys is orchestrated by an E-loop in perfect harmony and balance with the net. And then it has the cardiorespiratory systems and everything. And then you look at his behavior, it's regulated by another E-loop. So there are E-loops regulating this population of wildlife, and then we look at the species. So there's another E-loop about the species, how they mate, how they relate to themselves, how they relate to the environment that's existing at that time. And then there's interspecies behavior. So there might be some wolves, might be some human beings. So basically, if we take human beings out of the equation, the interspecies behavior, whether they get along, whether they don't get along, whether they have territories, whether the individual survival of the most powerful male or the most powerful female, all this is regulated by E-loops. And all these E-loops are in harmony and balance. So, collective natural functioning is optimized in accordance with the circumstances. So if there's a drought, if there's more of one species, there's a predator, and all those relationships are sort of determined by the circumstances each moment. So each moment there are these E-loops that regulate all this stuff. It's mind-boggling, but it's just part of how the net works. So collective natural functioning, like individual natural functioning, is not outcome dependent when we're looking at a particular, just like the toe or the soldier who gives up his life, that it's just dependent upon the whole gestalt, the whole net. Is this Jurassic Park? So if you look at the dinosaurs, and you just looked at that particular E-loop, you would say, hey, there's this cause and this effect that this outside meteorite, whatever it was, hit the earth and changed things. And you'd say, oh, there's cause and effect. And, if you look at it independent of the net, you look at it in a very limited way where cause and effect are separate. Just like, if we get bad disease or something, it's, hey, there's cause and there's effect. Of course there's cause and effect, but there's also a non-dual component. So every happening when viewed from the net is a complete, discrete event where cause and effect, inside and outside, has a new meaning. That's a big statement. So basically we're saying that the net determines all of this, and yes, dualistically there's cause and effect, but also there's a non-dual way of looking at it, that basically the happening isn't outside of the dinosaurs. You hit the lotto, you get fired from your job, you have a great experience in nature, that basically it's all part of one whole. And looked at from the net. You see, that it's a whole different way of looking at it, that we do not become a victim. The dinosaurs are not a victim of this meteorite. We are not a victim unless we're not connected with the net. But if we're connected to the net, as we looked at, the net goes through all space and time, from the beginningless beginning to the endless end. You know, what am I suggesting? We look at life and death, it may be with a different lens. That basically we're not victims. The I system makes us a victim of circumstances. When someone talks behind his back, when we lose our job and everything, it's like that event causes us to melt down. What we're saying is that this net of existence allows us to look at sociology, anthropology, physics, mathematics, business in a whole new way. Not denying what we know, but sort of looking at it maybe with a little higher power magnifying glass, or a little higher power microscope. So we're sort of looking at it not from a 10 power, 100 power, 1,000 power, but maybe with an electron microscope. We're really looking as deeply as we can look. We're looking into the ineffable. Physics is afraid of infinity. They're terrified of infinity because they can't understand it. So it's called a singularity. Whenever there's a singularity, it means you can't understand it. It goes to infinity. They don't know where it comes from. Although the late Stephen Hawking, he felt that science was capable of understanding the mind of God. And when we saw Stephen, Carol and I saw him in Seattle, that he had great physical disabilities, but we felt tragically sorry for him because he had this notion that his intellect, that science intellect, could understand the ineffable mind of God. But Stephen, I'm sure, will rest in peace. And by the way, he became much more spiritual when his brother had a near-death experience. So towards the end, that Stephen was being more open, shall we say, more open to the net. So what we're looking at is each happening to us when viewed from the net is a complete discrete event where cause and effect has a new meaning. So the dinosaur and the meteorite, it's sort of is another way of looking at it. So let's get to people. This is what we're getting our CEUs for. So when two or more people get together to do a task, they form a collective unit orchestrated by collective central control. So we're saying when you do couples therapy or family therapy, if you do individual work, and we've done a lot of that, I've done a lot of that we look at the individual maps and we work with the individuals and they do their individual practices. But what we're talking about is the unit, the couple, the marriage, and the interventions, as we'll get in later, needed to be directed to how does John's behavior influence the collective unit called marriage. The relationship is not how John's behavior when he goes and watches football all day, or he gets drunk with beer. Of course, people don't get drunk with beer here, but you know, how does that affect, or when Mary spends money? So what we're talking about is there's two individuals, or we're talking about a team. Team, just the word team means that there's an entity called team. There's an entity called, like we here are an entity. And this entity has a mission. The mission is to learn about the net of existence and the I-system model. Yeah. So every moment, you know, are we daydreaming about 5 o'clock, or are we sort of thinking about this, or are we resting about this? So each unit is orchestrated by that diamond that you have on your net of existence. So here is a way you can sort of look at it, that there's Mary and Joe, A and B, and then there's a marriage, and then there's churches, there's organizations, there's jobs, it just goes on. But what I want to point out is the bottom line. The power of the collective goes up exponentially as the number of loops are increased. So the power of two people, the power of a terrorist organization goes up exponentially. It isn't just simply we add up 1 and 1 and 1, but it could be, you know, a group of 5 people, a group of 10 people could do 1,000 times more good or damage than if you add them up. So we're looking at the power, and it makes sense, maybe to me, hopefully to you, that as you go larger and larger loops, that there's more and more power, and any social organization, any religious organization, any political organization, because there's something that happens that is related to the net. So this is, the group has a central control. They communicate through thoughts and action, and there's free functioning and unified collective state. So it isn't that you look over a temporal spectrum, but each moment, what is this group doing? What is this Boy Scout group doing? Are they learning how to take care of themselves and responsibility? So the group has a central control, and the central control is not, you know, our central control isn't in our brain. You know, that basically you say, well, the central control is in the brain. Well, there's more to us in this bag of bones. You all know that. So the central control, you're saying, well, where's the central control? Well, where is the central control here? Where is it? You see, that, where is gravity that it holds all the planets and stars and moon and sun? It's operationally how we look at it, and we look at it in terms of what? Each moment, our body has a mission to function in each moment, any group. So a couple, a marriage, have a good time, good. Have kids, not have kids. These decisions of the entity, okay, that basically it goes beyond the individual, and we're looking at the functioning of an entity which could be humanity, okay? And with human beings, rather than dogs and cats and wildlife, we sort of can input. We have a choice of what we input in the central control. So if our identity system is resting, if the group's identity system is resting. So how do you tell if a group's identity system is resting? Well, if we're all restless and irritated and want to get out, that we're not fulfilling our mission. The impaired functioning, well, we'll get to that in a minute, but natural functioning is just a smooth flow of taking care of what comes up each moment that any organization. So we now look at what's interesting, the collective I system functioning. So since every group is connected to the net, it has both dual and non-dual functioning. And the collective convergent dualistic functioning creates a collective I-centered reality akin to the individual I-centered reality. That my country is better than your country. That my understanding of the issue is different than, or better than your understanding, or different. Basically, that every group has an ability to function dualistically or non-dualistically. And their dualistic function creates an I-centered reality, which means that it sort of isolates itself from other groups, okay? That I am a Zen Buddhist, I am a Christian, I am XYZ, or I hate to tell you, because Isaac is here, I am a Yankee fan, okay? And he's a Red Sox fan. And we both come from Maine, and we both should be Red Sox fans. But I am a bona fide Yankee fan, okay? So basically, those interests, those values, that when you put them into a group, a whole bunch of Yankee fans, a whole bunch of Red Sox fans, college football, yeah, we want the Utes to win, yeah. So we develop sort of, and we'll get into what this I-system reality is about. And the purpose is to give the group a collective identity system created by the collective I-system. The free functioning for a group is to be a group. Yeah, the Boy Scouts are a group, the Girl Scouts are a group. Whatever the group is, that it's natural functioning, that they know who they are. And they can have uniforms, they can have dress, they can identify themselves. I mean, that is part of could be dualistic natural functioning. So every collective group, from people, from couples to humanity, has a collective I system that opposes natural functioning. And I think if we just look at political groups, we look at race, we look at nationality, we look at the world today, that we don't have to be a genius to know that this phenomena takes place. Okay? So, if we look at this, we could say that every group has this central group control, has sort of requirements, collective depressor fixer, impaired group functioning, dysfunctional group, or it could just be sort of natural functioning. How do we tell? Well, what does a group want to do? They're going to discuss an issue, a business. Should the young people wear headsets? And the older generation say, these people, they're not busy, we don't know what they're doing, that if we need their attention, we need to throw a pencil at them or a pen. And the young people say, well, there's studies that go on that show that when we have our headset, we are more productive, we accomplish more. Then the older folks say, hey, what if the phone rings, or I need to throw something at you? What if a visitor comes in and he sees you? What type of impression is he making on our customers? Okay, so management gets together, and if they're naturally functioning, they come up with a solution. If not, they have lots of heated discussions, there's group tension, there's impaired functioning, there's just lots of friction. How many of us have been in meetings where there's a lot more heat than light? Yeah. Has anyone not been in a meeting? Yeah. The heat is the I system functioning, and how it manifests, number one, in impaired functioning. That this management group is together to decide this issue. It isn't outcome dependent, but it's what is the process that goes on. And you can then look whether it's I system functioning or collective functioning. And when it's collective functioning, perceptibly, imperceptibly, we have access to the whole net. So the collective representational world of a group, okay? So we went over the individual representational world. So what are the factors? Well, these are some. There's, I'm sure, many more, but if we group it, it's the current state of the group. It's the presenting issue that basically we look at how they resolve the issue, okay? It's a history of the presenting issue, and it's the past history of the group. And this past history of the group might have to do with Jung's collective unconscious. So there's a lot of factors in World War II, pre-World War II Germany. There's a lot of factors that went into nationality, a lot of factors that had to do with how World War I was settled. Somehow, the people, that this was not individual, but it from the net, it was influenced. Like we have our natural function, you could say it's in our DNA. Yeah. So the natural functioning is located in the essence of the group. And of course, our natural functioning is not in our DNA. That's one of the representations of it. So looking at the representational world is absolutely crucial, okay? In understanding the collective central control. So let's look at a terror organization. So the terror organization, the central control's naturally functioning is grossly impaired by the distorted representational world. Is that crystal clear to everybody here? Is that crystal clear that their internal world is that we're good and you're bad, and if you don't do what we want, we will do this and we will be rewarded amply. So they may have a conception of the net, but it's a distorted connection, and that the net doesn't promise particular rewards because the rewards are ineffable. So the requirements are influenced by the distorted representational world. So it has requirements of doing mischief in Paris or England, or knifing people or shooting people. What we're talking about is the whole organization, whether they're cells, whether they're individuals. You know, they say, well, okay, are they influenced by it? Are they converted by somebody? Even a lone person who doesn't have any connection is still in the terrorist organization. It doesn't make any sense to distinguish the truth of the matter, that they're contiguous in space and time, or they communicate, is not the relevant issue. So they have the collective depressors, that these people are doing things, we feel miserable about it, but we're going to fix it because we're going to kill them, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. So their functioning may be to satisfy their particular requirements. However, we say their functioning is impaired because they're not natural functioning, and they have a dysfunctional collective state. So, in using the power of this model, that I personally believe that we don't understand terror organizations because we think it's them against us. We said they're evil, they're bad, they're misdirected. But they're part of this net, and they work with the same two-loop diagram that we work with. There ain't no difference between the way a terrorist organization functions and the most glorious, free-functioning organization that ever existed, okay? It's just this model will allow us. I don't know what the answer is to terrorism. I have no idea, and yes, I would like us to do better, but I know that if you get the people together and they understand this in a new lens, the I-system model net with the model of existence, they'll come up with a whole bunch of different approaches. Just like when those of you who do the practice, that the second map gives you a whole bunch of options. And if you're stuck with an I system map, and the map is really a picture of the I system, that you're limited. So we don't know the outcome, but using this particular model, which is sort of graphically indicated on your personal net of existence, using this model will allow us to look at things in a totally different way and to be able to intervene in a totally different way. And we could put crime in Chicago. Hundreds of young people just killing each other daily. We did some work with the Salvation Army, the charity, and just the people in the neighborhood are just shot daily. That the staff saying, "Oh, a relative was shot, my brother-in-law was shot." I mean, it's a frightening situation. How we intervene with gangs and killing. This is basically what social work is all about. I mean, the person and the environment, the social concerns. So I think this just gives another lens to the person and the environment. And I think that it would give you a lot of information about how to intervene with gangs, how to break up gangs, how to break up cells. I think it's very interesting to me. I don't know whether anyone else cares about it, but I think it's an issue that we have. We have racism and hatred and bigotry and looked at, and it's all part of the net. And it's all, that the racism isn't out there. It doesn't matter, well, am I racist or not racist? I mean, that's a simple dualistic question. What we're talking about is non-dualistically, we're connected, not just with the goodness, we're connected with everything. Every terrorist, every murderer, every sadist, every domestic violence offender. So that, means that we're not the same, but there's a non-dualistic way to look at that it allows you to come up with solutions, policy solutions, that are not now available. And it's dependent upon you folks. I'm too old to do that stuff. So the micro, meso, and macro, Derek is going to cover that tomorrow. The bottom line is all groups are either natural functioning or I system driven. So Derek will cover that. So what are the indications for collective interventions? Well, number one, there needs to be collective dysfunction. You don't go to the doctor if you're well. I mean, if a group is handling things, there's a lot more light than heat. Great, they're natural functioning, yeah? So basically, that there needs to be a particular dysfunction, and the second, they need to be open to change. I mean, a couple comes to you and one person doesn't want to change, it's going to be useless. You have your patient who doesn't want to change, your client doesn't want to change. So basically, the organization needs to be dysfunctional enough to realize they're dysfunctional enough that they're open, that they want to change. We can't intervene, even if it's dysfunctional. They may say, well, this corporation, we've done some productive mind trainings, and this corporation is making money, doing well, but there's a fair amount of dysfunction. But when they start losing money, when their profit margins go down, then they're open to change. You see? That basically the problem with the individual fixer is that if he gets rewarded, then he may not be as open to change unless he learns about the power of the eye system lens and mind-body bridging. So indications that we're just not going to go any place if they're not recognizing that they've got issues they need to resolve, and two, they need to be open to do something about it. You know, if they don't want to do something about it, terrorist organization, gangs, they may not be open. But a long time ago, I was I was on this tour about the Come to Your Senses book, and that was a long time ago. And it was at this bookstore, and this sort of gang comes in, and there's nothing against motorcycles, but they were a motorcycle gang. And they came in, there was about 6 of them, and they were talking, and they, you know, one of the gang members says, well, why don't you call it the A system rather than the I system? And so the boss of the gang, you know, he sort of understood through this, and so the gang petered out. So he then was starting to wonder if this would help him have his gang function more efficiently. You see? You know, maybe he just wanted to fix his fixer, but generally, you know, gangs are not particularly open to wanting to natural function. They may want to function more effectively. So the types of intervention, performance enhancement, you know, professional football teams have called us. We've worked with some major league pitchers teams. So basically there's 2 types. Either they want to perform better. Hopefully we'll be able to work with some college football teams. We've did some early work with the kids teams, and it seems to work pretty well. So one, they want to function better, or they want to resolve conflict, okay? They're sort of, there's a slash because they're related, obviously. The reason why they don't perform very well is they have an eye system that the team is not able to work that through. The second type of intervention is when the organization wants a culture change. So conflict resolution could be as easy as an hour or 2. The culture change, as we all know, is a long process. So collective MBB interventions that we know every group is connected to a wellspring of healing, goodness, power, and wisdom, just as the same. So, awareness of group tension and non-task-oriented discussions, which they just keep going around and around, and knowing that the collective I system is active, and then we have collective mapping to liberate collective natural functioning, and then there's doing collective practices to change the culture. So changing the culture is when the whole organization is able to look at I system functioning, natural functioning, and basically to have feedback. We'll get into that a little bit, but there is mapping which we can go over briefly, and Kevin is going to be covering that tomorrow after Dawn talks about the individual. So the applications, we're just getting into the principles today, but the applications are going to be coming tomorrow, so we're going to focus on that. So when we do collective mapping, we do one collective map with a group about the troubling issue. And obviously this is I system dysfunction. It needs to be a specific issue. Just like each moment, is it blood pressure high or low? Is insulin level adequate to lower the glucose? So you put the troubling issue, should employees be allowed to have headsets during work? And the whole group contributes and everyone says, hey, I know this is a fact that the research shows this and that, and the other one says, well, I know it's a fact that we're not accomplishing as much and we're losing money, and everyone seems to think that they're right. And in a sense, they may be right, but they're dualistically so identified with themselves that they're not able to simultaneously identify with the group and its particular mission. So there's a big wave of energy that the few of us who have done the collective mapping, the power is enormous. That you want to heat up, that you want to bring to a head all the friction you're looking for. You're not wanting to avoid it. You want to encourage the difference. You want to encourage the I system functioning. You want the I system to really show its face. Okay? That reminds me of this story. That this is a doctor's story, so you don't apologize. I'm going to tell you the story because Carolyn sort of holds on, but she doesn't know which story I'm going to tell, whether it's appropriate or inappropriate. So this guy had a tapeworm. This tapeworm just kept eating and eating, and they would give poison, and the tapeworm just wouldn't eat it. He was really a shrewd tapeworm. And he went all the way around the world. And no one, they gave him cathartics, they gave him everything. They tried to stick a tube down here, and he would go to the other end, and then they went sticking a tube this end, and they couldn't get him. He was just really a very naturally functioning tapeworm. So then he went to this doctor, and the guy was emaciated, and the doctor says, every day at noon, I want you to eat one hard-boiled egg for a week and then come back. And the guy says, I'm emaciated, I'm starving. This isn't going to work, I don't understand it. and everything else. But I've been all the way around the world. I've been to the University of Utah, I've been to UCLA, I've been to Harvard. No one could solve this problem. I'll do what you say. And the doctor says, okay, then I want to see you again in a week. And you just come back, 10 or 15 minutes before noon, and I'll be able to see you. And so he came back, and the doctor was right there. And then there was noon. And this tapeworm popped out of the guy's mouth and says, "Where's my egg?" And the doc pulled him out. So, back to the ranch. So, we want to create a lot of sizzle, a lot of energy. We want to really have this group disagreeing. We want to really, like in Finland, we did a euthanasia kind of thing. That was the issue. And the older people weren't so happy because if euthanasia got in, then the government would sort of have a determination. But the young people say, hey, that's a good idea. Look all the money we're going to spend. So anyways, there was really a very, very heated discussion, and it came very, very nicely to resolution. So what is preventing the resolution? So that's the second map. What is preventing natural functioning? So that's the title of the map. And people start to consider their responsibility. They come to go beyond their individual. They start to identify with the mission of the group. And as you do that map, there seems to be more natural functioning. There's more ownership. And then the resolution that sometimes we would do mapping, in a sense of bridging and then mapping, but other times you wouldn't even need to do the come to your senses practices. That the group, the power of natural functioning, the power of the connection, the power of these expansive E-loops is pretty amazing. So what is the therapeutic action of collective MBB mapping? So all interventions are aimed at allowing the group to recognize and experience the deleterious effects of the collective I system. They're able to do that on the second map. And once a group becomes aware of the counterproductive nature of the I system, what happens, this awareness, this powerful tool of awareness unleashes a wave of natural functioning. So it isn't the particular outcome, it's the fact that the group is functioning the way it functions. So when we've done organizations, and there's, some of us still working with organizations called the productive mind, that this functioning, it isn't to resolve the issue. So when I would do it, once the group was naturally functioning, I'd stop. All my job is to get the process going. And they'd say, well, where's the solution? Well, they'll come to a solution. I'm not interested in the particular solution. I'm interested in their natural functioning, in their connection with the net. So, presenter considerations, because of the strength and intensity of collective I system functioning and natural functioning, it's important for the presenter to have a strong personal MBB practice. That basically you're dealing with a lot of heat. You're dealing with a lot of energy. And the worst thing to do is try to fix a group, try to mitigate the group, try to encourage the group. That basically the main job, just as an individual therapy, is to be able to recognize and rest the identity system. So the function is simply to free up the collective natural functioning and not to be focused on a particular outcome of the process. The outcome is dependent by, as we said before, above the group's pay grade. So, what is a goal of MBB practice? So, it's simply aimed at liberating collective natural functioning by decreasing the activity of the I system. So, we go on the particular stages. The goal is quite simple. There's a lot of obvious details, but we'll get into your questions and discussion. I just want to present the model, and then we can discuss it. So the stages of MBB practice are very similar. The collective, the I system predominant functioning, dual functioning, and non-dual functioning. And obviously the collective non-dual functioning isn't accomplished in a day. That there's a lot of details to that, and sort of looking at the whole aspect of culture change. And if we look at that, stage one, the group is filled with interpersonal, intergroup strife and conflict. There's difficulty in arriving at a consensus, and a lot of the group functioning is sort of non-task oriented. And stage two, as the I system is recognized and rested, dual natural functioning begins to appear. The group becomes less fragmented, and function becomes more task-oriented. The group comes to realize that it is instrumental in preventing a resolution to the problem that they recognize their identity system. Non-dual functioning, the group becomes more task-oriented as individuals and subgroup simultaneously become aware of their connection, both with itself and the collective. And at that same time, the group experiences a newfound connection with opposing groups. So we're hoping we had some introductory work with peace organizations in Finland. We've made some presentations, but we feel that we can make a real contribution there. In the culture-changing interventions, one, you need to integrate the model into the culture, and you need to have continuous monitoring and feedback over time, which is what we've talked about, and you need to develop in-house quality assurance. And as we all know, that these engagements, it's not easy to change culture. We're talking about a year, but you need this continuous feedback. I've not asked for any audience participation, but why don't we sort of open it up? I want to give you a sort of a gestalt view of what the collective MBB practices, how the model is extrapolated to various levels, the micro, the meso, the macro, that sort of this net is it's sort of a meta model that overlies a lot of what we're talking about. So the applications of MBB, I wanted you to sort of to think about it, but there's a whole theory of mind. How does the mind work? You see, there's quality of life and the therapeutic. But these are the individual, and there's many, many more. But the collective, social theory, transdisciplinary approaches. About 5 years ago, there was this, maybe even more, professor at BYU. He wrote a paper on using the eye system lens to look at Hamlet. You know, these tragic heroes, he looked at it in terms of the eye system, the fixes, the depressors, the tragedy. It's a whole new way of looking at literature. It's a whole new way of looking at television, movies, books. So social theory, the transdisciplinary, I think business, athletics, performance, conflict resolutions, culture change, that these are just sort of the scratching the surface. And hopefully that you'll be able to really make these more specific and more concrete. Because basically it's, you know, the value of a model is helping human beings and helping humanity. And we know from this net that in a non-dual way we're influencing the path of civilization. And we looked at that curve that is curving downward, that if the eye system and collective eye system continues, there is a question, because we know that the net continues to be active even if the planet is destroyed. So, you know, there is, you know, obviously the answer to the questions beyond anyone's pay grade, and we don't even need to think about that, but the ramifications of the activity of the eye system. So those are the applications, and so this is the conclusion of this part of the talk, that when we read the newspapers, when we see the world, that we're tended to see that humankind is broken with this terrorist organization, with the suffering, with the inequality, with the bigotry, with the racism. But from your net of existence, that it's going to be able to make some inroads on this collective delusion or individual delusion that the world is broken. It ain't broken. It didn't break when this meteorite came and destroyed the dinosaurs. That basically there is ever so much more to existence and the relationship of existence to the creator, to the net. So I really thank you. You've been quite patient, you've been quite attentive, and I appreciate it.